Welcome to the Two Blokes Chatting radio show on 94.7 The Pulse. Music, interviews, news, and, well, two blokes chatting. Now, here are the two blokes.
So, Rob, who have we got on the telephone?
We have got who by Christmas will be Australia's best-selling author, I would imagine. A gentleman who's well known around Geelong Traps. He's about to release something pretty special in the sporting world. Wes Cusworth, good morning to you.
Hello, Rob. Hello, Neil. It's an absolute pleasure to join you both. Thank you so much, and it's great to hear you roll out some of your own personal collection in terms of music trap.
It's all part of the fun here, mate. We do 6 tracks every week, and there's always a theme. We play Stump Rob, and we see if we can work out the theme. Sometimes they're a bit obscure. Last week he was okay. Every one of them was a colour, so he was onto that one pretty quick, smart.
No, it's all good fun. Part of what we do here. Now, listen, Wes, before you can get your credibility as an author, we need to assess the credibility that you have formed over a long period of time in the sporting world. I incorrectly said Manifold Heights. I reckon the St Peter's Cricket Club is where you might have spent a bit of time in your youth. Just tell us a bit about your local sporting career, because there's a lot of listeners probably don't realise how good it is.
Well, St Peter's was actually a really successful only couple of seasons, however. I actually was raised in Leopold and played my cricket there from the ages of 8 to 27, and then I had during the course of that time, I actually missed 4 prime years of cricket because I was umpiring on the AFL list. So that was a great experience, but at the same time then I had the opportunity to return to cricket. I coached St Mary's initially and then had a couple of terrific seasons at St Peter's. Dabbled a little bit at North Shore, and then formed the Christian College Cricket Club, where I got the opportunity to open the bowling with Graham Ross, of course, former Victorian fast bowler, and that was outstanding. We went through as champions in our first season with Church's O grade.
That's another thing we have in common. I had the privilege of opening the batting one day with Graham Ross. That was a childhood thrill.
Mm.
And then he got himself out and in come Clinton Peak. I was on top of the world that day.
Yeah, a couple of great cricketing names for Geelong there, no doubt.
Definitely. The umpiring's interesting. So when did you decide to become a blind white maggot, and for what reason?
Interestingly enough, I always loved football, but I realised fairly early on that I was maybe even devoid of... I felt that my skill set was quite okay, but probably didn't like the hard physical clashes, which sounds a little bit wimpish, but hopefully you don't hold that against me.
No, I'm the same.
Actually, I ventured into the football umpiring world when I was still at high school, and actually found that it really benefited my fitness. And then actually football umpiring, I umpired every conceivable game that I possibly could. I think one season I umpired something like 58 games, because I'd be doing midweek games and Saturday games and then Saturday afternoon games and then Sunday games. And I actually got through university on the strength of my football umpiring, because of obviously just the extra little pocket money that provided, and enabled me to complete my physical education and English teaching course, which led me to become a teacher.
And the AFL umpiring ban, where was your most memorable day on that scene?
So I primarily umpired only under-19s, although I did umpire a couple of VFA senior games back in the day when the VFA was a really vibrant competition.
Oh, interesting place for someone who doesn't like the physical stuff.
Yeah. I must say it was a brutal brand of football. There's no question of that. One of the best games that I umpired, actually, I think it might have been the 1990. Maybe it was a qualifying final out at Waverley before the place wasn't used anymore. And I recall, being able to play a decision and look up on the big screen out of the corner of my eye and just to see whether or not I really did get right.
Because none of the umpires that umpire at the moment do that, do they? Good morning to you, Ray Chamberlain, if you're listening.
Actually, yeah, you raise a really important point there, Neil, because there's been a lot of conversation around Ray Chamberlain in recent times, and people are sort of saying, making different comments about him, and some people in his defence are asking, like, isn't he a good umpire, and like, isn't he doing the right thing? And my concern with Ray is the fact that he seems to be the impression that it's about him and that the crowds come to watch him. And I always felt that I was umpiring my best when I was relatively inconspicuous. And I think one of the greatest compliments I was ever paid as an umpire was, a GFL fairly important final one day, and we came off the ground and North Shore had won, and Ronnie Watt came up to me and actually said, I didn't even notice that you were there today umpiring, Wes. And I thought, to me, that was actually a really
ultimate compliment, really, isn't it?
Flattering comment, yeah, because I wanted to be inconspicuous. It wasn't about me, and I think the umpires do like to draw attention to themselves. Really are just making a bit of a rod for their own back, and I think that might have brought Ray undone this year.
Now, the media stuff you've done, well known. I recall watching you on Win News when I was living in Keith in South Australia. The Win News coming out of Mount Gambier. Sometimes you'd read all the news, sometimes just the sport, but your face was there fairly regularly and obviously put a lot of polish on the skill set. But going into writing the book that we've talked about with Gary, there was a lot of other stuff happening in the writing world behind the scenes before you got to that point, I imagine?
Yes, there was. I've been writing for the Geelong Advertiser for quite some time, over a period of time, on and off, a little bit like what Josh Barnes has experienced and other experienced people like Mark Browning, and there's been a number of people that have contributed in this manner, and I've really always enjoyed that. I remember back to the 1975 VFA Grand Final. I was 11 years of age, and Geelong West defeated Dandenong there at the Junction Oval, and I wrote my first match report for Year 5 creative writing, and I've still got that book. That was my first match review, and I think I look back now, and as much as I really, really enjoyed my physical education and English teaching career, I wonder why I didn't actually venture down the journalism pathway from the outset. So I feel that I had lots of writing experience behind me, but when Gary actually approached me with the view to doing the book, I questioned myself as to whether or not this is something that I could really pull off, because it was obviously of a very different nature. But then I was actually able to lean on some really seasoned performers themselves, like Mark Browning, who's a personal friend of mine through cricket, and also he's a Geelong supporter and the like, and I rang him and had a bit of a chat, and he offered me some advice. I spoke with Jeff Sly, who of course is he's spent a lot of time over there in Mount Gambier and would be well known to many of the people that you cross paths with there in Keith, Rob. And I also spoke with Warwick Hadfield, who once again is a very seasoned performer in the writing game and has written a number of books for Kevin Sheedy. And those gentlemen were all able to provide a level of reassurance to me that they felt that I had the capabilities to pull this off, and to essentially interview Gary, to draw his thoughts together and just to sort of straighten them all out and put them in a form that could be utilised in a publication that's got about 70,000 words.
So there are people out there listening who go, I think I wouldn't mind writing a book. I actually had a crack at it in 2010. It's one of those things everyone has to do at some stage in their life. Walk us through the process. You've got Gary Ablett, who's got all the knowledge in his head. You've got, bits and pieces of knowledge in your head from what you've seen watching him. How do you do you sit down and say, right, today, Gary, we're going to talk about your primary school days, or how do you approach getting the information out in a sensible, logical fashion?
That's pretty close to the mark, actually. And, it's an interesting situation where you do have to obviously do a fair bit of research in preparation, and so that you're asking the right questions and then listening carefully to the answers to look for those things, those little treasures that you may not have thought to ask yourself, but he's touched on, and you think, well, can you just expand on that a little bit more? So there was a fair bit of just sitting down and talking and recording. I recorded every conversation that we had, so that was something that I've had the opportunity to listen back on and enjoy listening to those conversations. Sometimes we would be sitting there eating or drinking and got distracted by Levi eating something, because Levi often attended our meetings, the little fella. Also, we had a number of coffee shop meetings where we might have people come up and ask for autographs and photos, and some of the people actually even wanted their photos and autographs from Gary too. I was
going to say, that must have been awkward with all those people walking up to you. I didn't want to steal your line. I thought I'll let you run with it just to see how you go. So the reason I'm looking for tips is Rob has asked me to write his biography. And it's not going to take very long, I don't think.
No, it'll be 10 or 15 minutes of your time. That's all it'll take, Neil. Hey, Wes, you clearly had a good base friendship with Gary to start with, and being such a private person, I suppose rather than going to a seasoned, hardened ghostwriter, he's probably come to you built around a trust factor. Would that be a fair suggestion?
Yes, it's a really interesting one, Rob. A lot of people have asked me that question about why would Gary come to me, and I don't ever interpret that as being like a condescending sort of comment. In fact, it's a really legitimate question. I think there's more AFL accredited journalists than there are accredited journalists following federal politics, and there's a fair bit happening in that space right at the moment. But yes, Gary came to me on the strength of our relationship. I taught him in Year 10, so he certainly had a knowledge of me. I taught all 4 Ablett children. I have a personal relationship with Gary Ablett Sr. I had met Mum, so he obviously had some knowledge of my knowledge and understanding of the family. And I think a really significant part of that was that we were reunited about 20 months ago when I was, as you know, Rob, I like my work as a master of ceremonies at functions and events. And I was invited to host a function and to interview Gary at a fundraising venture for his auntie up in Druin. So we met in Werribee, and then we had a 4-hour road trip up and back. We had Asava Radikalia with us, and we spoke really openly about the family and my knowledge. He was really quite flabbergasted by my knowledge of the family because he was a child when I first knew him and watched him as about an under-12 basketballer, absolutely tearing up the court, and then teaching him in Year 10. And so our relationship strengthened over the course of that time, and that's when I think he identified that from a faith perspective, importantly, we were very much on the same page. And I would say that he knew that if this book was to come out and accurately represent him, his faith needed to be presented in the way that he really wanted it to be done, and that was something that he felt confident that I could achieve. So I would say that it's that chapter in particular. I think there's a lot of journalists that could have written the book when it came to football, but when it came to explaining his faith journey and his relationship with God, that was something that was pretty unique, and that he felt was critically important that was accurately represented. And I'm really flattered the fact that he felt that he could have the confidence in me that we could pull that off.
Yeah, because it's that little mystery part of his life, and certainly his father's life, that say we have not of faith found interesting. But that's why I asked the question, that he would have needed that to be represented correctly, and clearly you had won that respect, which as you said was clearly very flattering. Yes,
it was. And I mean, I think for him, his faith has really grounded him. And one of the things that I really love about Gary, and I was reminded of that more and more as I sat and ate meals with him and drank coffee with him and went and visited him in his home multiple times. He's a really, really humble man. He's turned into a really impressive adult. And I know that not everybody is going to get the opportunity to meet Gary Ablett personally. And I'm not sure how people assess Gary, and I'm sure that there are some people that adore him and other people that don't necessarily respect him for whatever reason. He's one of the very best footballers that we've ever seen. But the reality is I can assure people that he has turned into a really fabulous adult, and I feel really proud to be associated with the book.
I had the privilege of spending a lot of time with him in 1999 at Mottawarri, and even then, under the enormous pressure that he lived, which affected his brother Nathan differently, much differently. He certainly wasn't the same worldly chap that Gary was. He was a very humble young man. He was a very respectful young man and appreciative of those in his life that helped him. And I haven't seen too much of a change in his character in all of those years. You obviously don't get to see him day to day, but the way he presents himself certainly backs up the story you said. But interestingly, I don't see that it was something that someone developed in him. I saw it at a 15-year-old boy, exactly the same.
Yes, I think that's true. Getting to know his mother a little bit through this process, she is a very kind-hearted, caring, loving person. She's a fabulous lady. Gary Ablett Sr. has obviously had his ups and downs throughout the course of his life, but in the main, he's a very caring, genuine person. And I think that is reflected in all of the kids. Sadly, we lost Natasha, and I did know her. As I said, I taught all 4 of the children, and they all had some fabulous qualities. Gary and Nathan are very, very different in personality, and I taught both of the boys. Well, in fact, as I said, I had cross paths with all of the children, so I got to know them. But look, I think one of the real challenges for people that are in the limelight and enjoy the high profile that the likes of the Ablett family do is particularly with Gary, is that there must always be that question in the back of your mind, like, do you want to get to know me because you want to be able to go out to your friends and say, I know Gary Ablett, or is it because you genuinely like me as a person? And there must always be that sort of questioning. But I can assure people, as I said, that Gary's turned into a really fine human being.
Yeah, no doubt.
And without giving away the book or any secrets or any confidences that he may have shared with you, I'm desperately hopeful that today's his last game of AFL football as a Brisbane Lions supporter. He has at least one, if not two, games of footy left. What do you reckon he'll do post-footy? I don't see him going into the media. Is he likely to do something in the church? Is that your sense, or is there something else that he's got on his horizon?
Gary's a great entrepreneur. I think you'll find that, and obviously there's been that wine range that has been released, which is just absolutely flown, well, figuratively off the shelves, because obviously it's being ordered online. But I can tell you that Gary has got quite a number of ideas up his sleeves. He's obviously got the, I think it's called the vacay already happening, where he takes, in the off-season, he takes groups of people that are maybe almost like a health farm type concept, where he takes people up to the Gold Coast and they have their own chef and they have fitness regimes, and you get to work out with Gary in a group of about 10 people over the course of a week, and it's a bit of a straightening up of your life type thing. So Gary's really passionate about that. I think you can see the way that his body shape has developed to cater for the role that he's been assigned this year, which is playing a little further upfield rather than on the ball and having to run out a game primarily almost entirely 4 quarters of football as a midfielder. He's very self-aware, both physically and also emotionally and also mentally too, I suppose. And so Gary is really passionate about that side of things, but I think you'll find that there's lots of business interests that he has, and I think that he will steer clear of the media. Don't think that's something that is necessarily attractive to him. Coaching-wise, I wouldn't be surprised that in time, after a bit of a break from the game, because remember that for 19 years of his 36, he's actually been an elite level footballer, so he just does need a break. But he has got so much knowledge and understanding, and the nuances of the game are something that seemingly come very naturally to him, but can I tell you, he works incredibly hard. And so I think that he has got so much that he can impart to young players that in time he may well find himself even offering some sort of consultancy type of role to clubs and hopefully the Cats in terms of helping young players develop.
Yeah, well, I imagine the door would always be open at Cardinia Park for him in any facet of the game that he wanted to attach himself to. Do you sense that despite the years away at the Gold Coast, which he probably looks back now, and I'm interested to read that aspect of his game, whether he was happy that he went away or not, but he looks like Geelong's going to be home base forever?
Yeah, I think so. Look, there's no disputing the fact that his movement to the Gold Coast was a massive part of the Geelong Football Club history. But in terms of Gary and his development as a person, not only as a player, but as a person, very importantly, the Gold Coast experience was really, really important. And his development has been accelerated and also expanded as a result of his movement to the Gold Coast. So, yes, I'm like a lot of Geelong supporters that was disappointed to see him go, because I think we could have won a few more flags during the course of that time beyond 2011 had we had Gary Ablett Jr. playing. But, the Gold Coast experience was a really important part of his journey.
The years at Motowari, obviously very important to his formulation as a character. I'm really looking forward to the 3 or 4 chapters you'd no doubt put aside for that part of his life.
I think it's going to be fun, Rob. I think when the book comes out, and let's keep in mind the fact that this is a 304-page coffee table tribute to the Ablett family, and most specifically Gary Ablett Jr. There are photos from right throughout the course of his life, and I was actually able to source some fabulous photos from the Bolton family, of course, Matt and Jack, and their folks. And some of the junior photos that include some of the Motowari boys, there's going to be some people that are going to buy the book, not only because they're really interested in Gary Ablett Jr., but they're going to buy the book on the strength of the fact that they're actually in it, because there's some fabulous photos. And, they all benefited from the fact that they had one of the best trainers in under-15 football in the... that was the Ballarat Football League then, wasn't it?
It was. I could carry a towel like no other, Wes.
Yes, fine performance. That team photo that you and I both know what we're talking about. Other people will look and recognise quite a number of faces over and above Gary Ablett Jr. It's going to be great to see the level of pleasure that brings a lot of people.
And the great Wayne Skippy Carroll, who's a friend of the show, and his company Geelong Line Marking have been great supporters. He had a lot to do with Gary and Nathan and Gary Senior during that period of time, and developed a really important friendship with Gary's mother too at that time, which was important to keep everything balanced. And I'm sure his name will pop up in that as well, and he richly deserves to be remembered in that memoir, I would imagine.
Yeah, he sure does. He does feature, and Gary speaks really fondly of his time there and the number of people that contributed. They're really important ages and stages of life, aren't they?
Yeah, very much so, because it was clearly because of the pressure that they were under through no fault of their own, just being the sons of an absolute superstar, and daughters for that matter. But just having a lot of good people around them, and clearly yourself being one of them, just to keep the balance in their life. And yeah, it's all worked out pretty well for certainly the two boys that are in the major spotlight there. They remain good people, and those formative years, no doubt, were important.
Absolutely, and yeah, as I said, that's going to bring a lot of people a lot of pleasure when they get to see the book, which is coming out on November 5.
Now, the name of the book is, as I understand it, Rob Cameron and Skippy Carroll, The Role in My Life by Gary Ablett. Is that correct?
Name's the other way around. Yeah, we've got to get that right.
Now, Wes, we don't know the future of Gary Ablett, but we got a chance to ask you. You put your toe in the water of taking your media type career to another level by doing this. Is this something you've got an appetite to do more of?
Well, it's really interesting, Rob, because I was already in the process. I've always wanted to do a book. Let me say, ever since the teenage years, I've always felt quite aspirational about doing a book, and I even get teased by some of my mid-50s friends that remind me of my show and tell exploits in primary school and things like that.
I could imagine, actually, knowing you as I did, they'd be exciting times.
Well, I mean, when you think about it, I actually had that decade in television, and television's about show and tell, so it's just show and tell for grown-ups. So in terms of a book, I've always aspired to do one, and then I had one in the works celebrating the East Belmont Cricket Club Premiership of 2018-19, because, as you know, I do love my cricket photos, and I'd taken a lot, and I also lent on Russell McMahon quite extensively to help source photos, and then I had my Geelong Advertiser writing, and thank you to the Geelong Advertiser for providing the necessary support there and helping me with tear sheets and also allowing me to use the text. So I had a book in the works, and then, of course, the Gary Ablett book came along. And in fairness to East Belmont, I know they appreciate the fact that their book could wait, because Gary's couldn't, because the publishing company was quite adamant that we needed to move things along. So since the Gary Ablett book has been finished, I've also finished the East Belmont book. I've got a North Geelong tribute book from the last summer just gone in the works. That's about 75% done. And then the East Belmont Mafia got onto me and lent on me, and now we're doing one celebrating their 2017-18 season. But a larger project than even that is that I am planning a tribute book to the 1963 Geelong Football Club Premiership, where, of course, we beat the Hawks. And given the fact that I'm still scarred by 1989 and 2008, I do need to celebrate a victory against the Hawks in the grand final.
Very much so.
That's why we'll go down the 1963 pathway, and I've already started the interview process, interviewing the remaining 12 players from the 1963 Premiership. Started with Billy Goggin. We've got the Cat's Whiskers podcast that I actually host, and we've got Doug Wade on this week, so we'll have an opportunity to tease out a few things from him. So some exciting things happening.
There's not a funnier man as addressed a group at a sportsman's night than the aforementioned Douglas Wade.
You have mentioned that, and I can tell you that a number of other people have mentioned that too. He comes with big raps. So
he's a very, very funny man, and we'll be able to get to the bottom of why was Jeff Rosenow in the team photo in 1963 but did not play in the game. I'm sure that's will come up in your research as well, and caused a VFL rule change, I do believe.
Yeah, it's look, I mean, his famous name. I played against Jeff Rosnow's son in Churches cricket, Ash Rosnow, who was since moved to Queensland, but was a very good player. There's some funny stories will come out of that, no doubt. But I was born in 1964, and for a long time, all we talked about, and I'm sure you share this thought, Rob, and that is that 1963 was our last premiership. For a long time, Bobby Davis was our last premiership coach. And so, and that actually reminds me of something that's, I believe, one of the absolute features of the Gary Ablett book, and that is the fact that I had the privilege of interviewing Bomber Thompson in what I believe was, if not the first, but certainly one of the very early interviews with Bomber Thompson after his indiscretions. And so that was a great privilege to talk to Bomber Thompson about Gary Ablett Jr. and their relationship, and which a lot of people, in the minds of a lot of people, soured, and there's no doubt there's some issues arose, but I think they're on pretty good terms now.
No, that's good. Good finish, because that was a very concerning time, that 2010 season, and Gary and Bomber's departures. Wes, thank you very much. We await with interest for November the 5th for the release of the book. Congratulations on the body of work that you have done already, and I'm pretty sure the future's going to be full of rosy stuff for you.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you, Neil. It's been a pleasure speaking with you both.
Thanks, mate. But we stamped all over the title of the book before calling it. What is it actually going to be called?
The book is actually called Gary Ablett, an Autobiography. So
nice and simple.
No.
Yeah, nice and simple. And there's a quote from Joel Selwood on the front cover that says that that quality of being the competitor and the warrior, only unique, very special players carry those qualities. And that's another feature of the book, is my interview with Joel Selwood and also Gary Ablett Sr.
Excellent. Thanks, Wes. Thanks for joining us on the Two Blokes Chatting radio show.
Thanks so much.
Johnny, mate, all the best.